Recently we played a Strandberg and it was one of the most surprisingly amazing guitars I've ever played. So obviously I really wanted one. This is the Standberg Bowden Essential, which is about £1,000. I don't really have a spare £1,000 from the channel's perspective, but I wanted one so much. I thought, how can I acquire one? I'm laying in bed, I'm laying there thinking they're probably not going to send me a Strandberg, the channel's too small. Then I had an idea. I thought, I've got some Chapman ML1 kits, some unfinished ML1s, which I might be able to reshape. It is worth noting that after doing this, it would have been 1,000 times easier. So you can do this with, I don't think you could do it with a Strat with a swimming pool route, you know, the pickups in the top like your normal Strat, but any Strat where it's body mounted pickups, so have a rear cavity. If you had this style of Strat, or if I'd used this body, but this is for making a Strat, it would have been 1,000 times easier. So if you want to do this, start with a body blank without anything in it. That would be the easiest. I didn't, which you'll see in a minute. To start with this, or not your traditional Strat with the pickups in the top and a pick guard. You want a Strat that doesn't have a pick guard, so everything's rear mounted. Apart from the pickups, they'll be set in, but they don't change. So if you want to do it, definitely go that route. This is the worst way of doing it, but it is possible. The next day, I got the Strandberg out, which I'm borrowing from someone. I cut a pencil in half, so I made a small offcut of pencil, and then I cut it in half like the weird way, so that the lead is at the edge. Then I put a bit of tape along that edge, so I wouldn't get pencil around the guitar. And I put this on a 9mm offcut of MDF, and I drew round it. And if I'm being honest, when it came to the neck pocket, I just completely blagged it and freestyled it and sort of hoped for the best. I cut round that MDF template and made my own. Sorry, the guitar, and made an MDF template. Some of the bits didn't quite fit, like this bit I had to glue on. And I'm sure there's one other bit, this tiny bit here I had to glue on, so it wasn't quite big enough for the little MDF offcuts. I think these are A3 size. Just bought them off eBay because I couldn't be bothered to get a full sheet. Use that template to make another template where I cut out where the neck would go. So I did measure this quite accurately, so this could sit on my Chapman, because if you've noticed, it's made it difficult as well. This is a through neck, so I can't take the neck off. So I had to make it so, let's show you. So this can go on here, and I'm actually going to make another one. So leave some comments actually, because I could do another video if you want more information. I'm doing another one now. About to start this, so let me know if there's any more info you want. I can show you how to do this, but stick this on, job done. You've got a template of this. This ML1, it has a carved top, so you can't sit a router on or a jigsaw because it's going to go at an angle and just ruin Christmas. So what I did is I stuck the template on, the one with the neck cut out, stuck that on with masking tape and super glue, and then I cut all the excess off, sort of 5mm away from the edge of the template with a jigsaw, just to remove, like, trim the fat off. And then use this, because it's going to be a 90-degree cut, to run a route around. What you will notice, because it's a completely different shaped guitar, this little bit's a bit different. Some of these offcuts are different. I can't make this stick out as far as possible. That's all fine, so it is a slightly different shape. I did use this and shimmy it along a bit to sort of blend these two carves. But the bit you lose the most of, if you look here, this Strandberg horn sticks out further, which would probably help with balance. But I didn't have that luxury, because this guitar doesn't have, I could have stuck a bit on, but it would look terrible and probably snapped. So I just cut this bit off, and it ended up with a nice little cut up where the horn was. I really like it. I think it's a really nice feature that I've accidentally made. I kept all these little bits that I cut off, and I took some shots of it sort of laying flat on the bench. I just thought it looked so cool with all these little bits of sort of offcut next to the guitar. So I did some scenic shots of that. Next thing I needed to do, because it has the cavity at the back here, and if I put this template on here roughly, you'll see like the edge of the guitar goes straight through that template. So I cut like a square of the offcut and shaped the top flat so it sit in, and then I made a template out of, I had some chunks of ash lying around. I cannot find the template, I don't know where I've put it. It's sort of 1.25 inch thick chunks of ash, which I stuck together and made a template to relocate a block of the body into the rear cavity, which I'm going to have to do again on that other one. That's why it'd be better to start with just a body blank and not with an existing guitar, but you know, we'll show you the hardest way so it's more fun. And then I put that template on the body, glued it on, and then routed it out. I think I had to use chisels to make the edges square, and I always test your template first to make sure it will fit. Tested that, glued it in, job done. Again, I stuck my template on the body and then I had to reshape where that block was sticking out. That only took about 10 seconds. It looked like I had a one-piece guitar. It looked a little bit bastardized from the back, but looked pretty cool. I have a Crimson Guitars cavity template. Now it lets you cut the outline of so it lets you cut the actual cavity plate, and then a bit pops out, and then you can cut the indent for that, so you can sink it into the body, and then it lets you cut the bit for the cavities, so obviously it leaves the bits sticking out around the edge to fit screws to. It's brilliant. It's like a 3-part template, and I used that to create a new control cavity, and as you can see, this is really close to the edge of the guitar. I needed it quite close to here because the jack socket is in this area, sticks right through. I put it at an angle, which is sort of where it is on a real Strandberg. Is it? It's not quite. They've recessed it. I didn't do that. Maybe on the next one. And I also put so you can see the switch is near the edge here on a Strandberg. I try to keep that in a similar place. For an idea of where the switch is going to go, this 3-way switch, I used a Strat pick guard. So I just set it around the neck and roughly where the bridge was going to go, kept it in line with the centre line, and drew on the guitar body where the switch was going to go. In hindsight, with this, the original 3-way expensive switch stuck through the back of the guitar, so I had to buy a different brand one and then shave the back of the cavity cover so it would fit, just about fitted. Should have just used the 3-way Gibson switch, which I'm going to do on the next one. Like cutting these slots by hand with a 3mm chisel and drill bits and all the rest of it, not fun. Use a 3-way Gibson switch. This is a stupid idea, but you know, we'll do it the hard way so you can see. Now this, like I said, this ML1 had a carve around the edge, so I wanted the carve on this arm bit as well. So I got my circular saw and set the saw blade to about 3 or 4mm. I can't remember if I did it by eye or not. I probably did it by eye. I do a lot of it by eye instead of measuring stuff. But you should measure it. What I like about a circular saw blade, if you go easy and don't do anything dangerous, it gives that sort of concave, not convex, concave cut. And I just ran that around the edge, looked really good, and then smoothed it over with a random orbital sander. At this point, I thought, well, the project's actually working, so I wanted to test it would work, so I wasn't sure. So I was like, okay, at this point, I'm going to do a fret job, because the frets on it were just rough cut frets, effectively. So I got all my Crimson Guitars tools, because I think they're really good. Actually, I made the end file they use for sort of putting the 15-degree bevel on it. I made that myself. There's a video on that. I'll put a link at the end. In fact, all the tools I used for this, so everything from Amazon, all the stains, everything, check the description. I'll put a link to every single tool and every single bit I used for this. But used the Crimson leveling file. I used their fret end dressing. Their fret end dressing file is really good. The reason I wanted to check it worked first, doing a fret job for me takes probably between 2 and 3 hours by the time you've polished the frets up and all the rest of it. And I didn't want to do that first, then ruin it, have to throw it away and waste hours of work. Anyway, it all went to plan, so I was like, okay, we'll do the fret job. On this one, I'll do the fret job first, just because it stops your fingers getting sort of, don't know, it can be, this one's actually alright, but it can be quite sharp. The next part of the project, the Strandberg has like a 3-sided neck. So it's got this flat bit along the back, and this is actually offset, so it goes from sort of this side to this side. So it's got this 3-sided thing going on. I thought, you know what, I'm going to try and make that. And I thought, well, it's already got a carved neck. So firstly, I got a centre line the whole way down the neck and made sure it was completely flat. So we started with that. And then I went a little bit offset. I didn't want to go miles with this, because if I go through to the truss rod, the whole thing's ruined. But I went a little bit offset, so it's not as extreme as the Strandberg, but it does go from this side to this side by a few mil. So just make sure this flat bit stays in line with the fretboard, which is easier said than done. And then, well, shape the edges. And mine sort of curves out because it has to go to the existing curve at the end. But this is super nice. I also measured it the other day. Mine's 18.5mm thick, which is super thin, and the Strandberg's 22, so mine's actually thinner. I suppose it would have to be because I removed more material. Played this at rehearsal the other day. Oh, it's so nice. For all the other bits of the guitar, I always check the centre line. So this is 2 joined pieces of timber, so the centre line should be in the middle. I have had it, not on a Chapman, but I've had it on Squires definitely, and I believe a Fender. I've seen it on some guitars. The centre line on the guitar, or the centre of where everything is fitted, is not in line with the neck. So what I do is I get a straight edge, hold it against the edge of the neck and mark the edge of that, and then mark the centre of that to check where the actual centre line is. Because if the neck's a tiny bit off and you put the bridge on the centre line, all your strings are going to be off. So got a new centre line, and work to that. I would 100% recommend doing that on every build you do. This is a Strat, so it's got a 25.5-inch scale length. So I used that straight edge. I'll put a link to that in the description. It's a really good quality one, actually, to work out where this bridge had to go, where the saddles would sit, because you can adjust these forwards and backwards a bit, only a certain amount. So I made it so that I had adjustment, because you don't want to fit it and then you can't move the saddles further forwards or backwards. So 25.5-inch to the centre of where the saddle adjustment would go, and go from there. At that point, I wanted to check the action, so I did same straight edge again, rested it on the nut, rested it on the bridge saddle, and looked at the distance between the underside of the straight edge and the frets. Did that for all of them, had a little look, and I thought, that's too high, so this bridge needs to come down. Problem is, if these saddles are set at their lowest point and the intonation is too, or the action is too high, you can't really adjust it afterwards. Don't want to be filing saddles down. I'm not going into that. Brass saddles, that would be fun. So they're just too small. So I knew I had to set the bridge in about 3mm, because then you can always raise it up a little bit, and that's fine. So I had to make a template for the size of the bridge. So I used some offcuts of MDF, made this, so glued some bits of MDF together, made sure all the straight edges are the ones that the router's going to go along. Used my centre line to keep that in line, used a square to make sure it was square, glued that to the body, and then ran a router around and made this little indent 3mm. I also removed the back edge of it just because I thought it would look cooler. I suppose you don't have to do that, but I did. Just did that with a, I'm going to say hammer and chisel, I just did it with a chisel. Very sharp chisel. I then sat the bridge in that dent and I marked where the fixing holes would go. Now there's these tiny little screws that hold these individual bridge things to the bridge plate, and they actually stick through the back about 0.5mm. I didn't want it to rock, so I worked out where all those would go in all 3 positions in case I needed to adjust this later, and I used the drill to make these tiny little dents, so 18 of them, just so nothing was a problem later on. Just as a side note, I will put a link to this bridge. This is a Nova bridge. I think it was about 120, but by the time I paid shipping, all the rest of it, it's about 160. Came with a nut as well. What I found is Strandberg bridges cost a fortune. Hipshot do a headless guitar bridge, which is about 500. I was like, I'm not paying that, because this could all go wrong and be totally, I might hate it. And there's all the cheap ones around 60, and every single review, and I went through all the forums having a look, you know, they're too hard to tune or they fall apart. I was like, well, again, I don't want to put all this effort in and it's fall apart, so I went for this. I'll put a link to this in the description. Now, I got this from eBay, but they have a reverb shop as well. I don't know why I went for eBay over reverb. Can't remember. I was probably just on it at the time. Anyway, I bought this. I think it was about 160 all up delivered. Brilliant. The adjustment is brilliant. Absolutely love it. I think it's brilliant. So I'll put a link to that in the description too. Strandberg's truss rod access. Where is it? Oh, it's at the top. Okay, Strandberg's truss rod access is there on the end. I thought it was at the bottom of the guitar. You learn something new every day. But this already has a truss rod where a normal truss rod would go. I thought it was on this end, which would be easier if it was this end. Anyway, the truss rod's here, which means you can't put this nut right against the end of this nut. Otherwise, if you need to adjust the truss rod, well, your life's over. In fact, it's actually quite hard to get a truss rod, well, an Allen key in there. So I'd probably have to cut down an Allen key. I wanted this not miles away from it. Anyway, I put masking tape over the headstock. Got an idea of the shape I wanted, basically where the last machine head hole was going to go, and I drew this shape on there. One thing I bared in mind is, with the Strandberg, I know 1,000 people have commented you can hang this on certain guitar hangers, some kind of ukulele hanger and all the rest of it. I didn't want to go through and find a special guitar hanger. I've built all of these, normal guitar hangers, wall hangers, so I deliberately left this a bit bigger so that you can hang it in a normal wall guitar hanger without worrying about it falling off the wall. Best thing I could have done. Can hang it anywhere in my house or studio. And, I mean, all headless guitars look silly, but it's alright, isn't it? I cut the headstock. I used a jigsaw to cut roughly near the line, and then files and rasps, well, rasps then files, to get it closer, and then just gave it a bit of a sanding. To get this purple colour, now I got this colour idea from some other YouTuber's video. Again, I'll put a link in the description. Now, you use what's called Feebling's leather dye. So I normally use Crimson Guitars dye, but I thought I'd try something different. So I've got a light blue Feebling's dye, and I put blue over the front of all of this. Let that dry for I don't know how long, maybe an hour or something. Then sanded it back so that the blue just remained within the flames on the timber. I then got some Feebling's red dye, again leather dye, I'll put links in the description. and I went over the whole thing again. I needed one coat of each. Now that came out looking really dark, so actually not soaked, but I dampened some kitchen roll, some paper towel with water, and wiped it over a few times just to try and bring out some of that dye, which did work. It's still really dark, but that's acceptable. It was too dark to begin with. I probably should have diluted it. I didn't bother, typical me, but in fairness, it does look awesome. Because this was an existing guitar, there was actually a tiny bit here where the old switch sort of thing was, and the fixing for the switch hole, which I had to fill. I also went through the top of the body when doing this block, so I had to fill that. So I knew I was going to have to do a black spray around the edge of the guitar, like a burst, just to hide that. So I got some black nitrocellulose and sprayed around the edge of the guitar so it looks like a burst. Never done that before. Surprisingly easy. What I should have done is taped to the edge of the top, but I didn't. I taped to the edge of the cap, which is about 5mm down, and I'd stained all of that, which meant that this feebling stuff seems to run quite a lot, so it stained all the mahogany at the back, which is a bit of a problem. On the next one I'm going to tape to the edge of the top, and it shouldn't run that far, but you know, we're too late for that now. So it looked like it was ruined. I wasn't sure what to do. I thought, I don't want to spray the whole guitar black because it's a through neck. I'd have had to spray all the way up everything. I could have sprayed it with black nitro, but that wasn't my plan. So I got the feeblings stuff out and I stained the whole body blue, let that dry, then I stained it red, and it's sort of this deep purple. This guitar is all nitrocellulose, and the back is actually satin and the front is gloss. I used Northwest Guitars satin on the whole of the back, and Northwest Guitars gloss nitrocellulose on the front. I think I did about 4 coats on each and gave it a light wet and dry paper sanding between, about 1,000 or 1,500 grit, so it's super smooth, I suppose. But the front's a bit glossy because I thought I want it to look sexy, and the back's satin because I want it to feel nice. To ground the bridge, drilled a hole for the bridge wire. Then I stuck a piece of copper foil, like you'd use to insulate the cavity. The same stuff that I insulated that with, I put underneath the bridge. I used a file to file the back of the bridge because it's aluminium. Aluminium isn't that conductive, so I filed the back of the bridge, and with the cable that goes into here, I put there's quite a long bit of cable, you know, like a few inches bent round underneath here, just to make sure it gets contact, and then screwed the bridge down. It did ground really well, or it's grounded, so that's fine. But you've got to be careful with these aluminium bridges because you don't want a buzzy guitar. After screwing the bridge to the guitar, I needed to sort out the intonation, so how far the saddles are sort of forwards and backwards. And what I did was use that same straight edge, link in the description, on my Telecaster, and I measured each saddle individually, the distance from the nut to where the saddle is. I thought that's going to be really close. I did that with each of these saddles and made sure they were exactly where they needed to be, because this is a bit of a, it's actually, in fairness, it wouldn't be that difficult to intonate, but I wanted it to be really close and not have to bother. I actually got it bang on, so I'd recommend doing that. For the action, again, same straight edge, rested it on the nut and the bridge saddles, and I did it by eye. I did it for what looked good, again, sort of using the pink Telecaster as a bit of a template, and I was looking at the distance between that last fret and one of the middle frets, where that would sit. What else did I do? Oh, I checked the fretboard radius, so they've got the same radius as the frets and the fretboard. Otherwise, you know, if it's too bumpy in the middle, it's going to be rubbish. So when you've done it, make sure that the saddles have the same radius. It will just play better. The nut is super easy. It sticks about 0.5 millimeter past here on this side, but I wanted much space as possible for the truss rod, so I don't care. But it's just pre-drill 4 screw holes and fix it to the headstock. Just make sure the actual screws that were supplied would have gone through, so I changed the screws and coloured them in with a Sharpie, but just make sure you're not going to put the screws through the back of the headstock because that will look bad. Pickup wise, I'm waiting for a set of Guitar Atlas pickups to arrive. They haven't arrived yet, but I'm going to put those in. Currently, I've got something weird going on. I've got a bare knuckle Abraxas in the neck, but it is wired permanently split, so it's a bit like a single. It's a split humbucker. It's not going to sound quite the same as a single coil. So it's like a single coily-ish. It's half a humbucker, a split humbucker in the neck. It's about 14k resistance, so I suppose 7k for one side of it. And that is a Monty's retro wind humbucker in the bridge, which is actually a neck humbucker. I think about 7.5k resistance. Actually quite a well-matched sounding set of pickups. It's not as single coily as I'd want it, but it's as good as you're going to get from a split humbucker. Like I said earlier, I insulated the cavity with copper tape. I'll put a link in the description. This backplate, I used the Crimson Guitars tools that I mentioned earlier to shape this backplate. This is just an offcut of ash. Looks nice. Sprayed it black. Wasn't sure what else to do. It's the same black as round here. Looks nice. And then strung it up, which takes about 10 seconds. I've actually got this taped over because I'm going to surprise Rob Chapman with this, because I want him to try and figure out what the hell it is, because it's one of his guitars. It's a Chapman ML1, and I don't think he might guess. One of my friends, I showed this and he guessed it was an ML1, so he might do, he might not. One thing that's worth getting for this project, or any guitar project, I bought an expensive full face mask, so like goggles and breather in one, mainly because nitrocellulose is highly toxic. When I didn't use a proper mask, I'll put a link to this in the description. I think it was about 80 or 100 pounds, which I don't think is actually that bad. But I used to get it feel terrible for days after spraying nitrocellulose on. I mean, everything in here is nitro. I mean, I'm careful. I do it all outside and I leave it for a month to dry, not inside. So in the other part of the shed, so I don't get to breathe in the fumes. But it still made me feel really bad. This new mask is brilliant. Also, it's a full face mask, which I wear when doing anything like routing. When I've used a router before, I've had a bit snap and it hit me in the foot. I was wearing flip-flops, obviously, and I thought, if that hit me in the face or in the eye, that would really hurt. So I wear a full face mask. I'm a bit like, you can't get hurt then. And also I do that when using any kind of, pretty much any tool, to be honest, especially a table saw, because you get bits flying at your face. And I've done, there's an oak an oak whiskey barrel right in front of me, video on that coming soon, but I'm also turning part of that into a guitar, and I had to run, you'll see in the video, I had to run bits through the table saw and bits were flying at me, bits of oak, you know, oak spears at your face. So wear a full face mask, best 100 quid you'll ever spend. Just protect yourself. And that's it. I think it looks absolutely amazing. I played it at rehearsal the other day. I didn't do any shots of that. It felt absolutely amazing. It felt really good to play. It is slightly heavier than this Bowden Essentials Strandberg, but it is thicker because it's got a carved top. This has a bolt on. This has a through neck or through body. I don't know what it's called. A through neck. So nitrocellulose finish, fancy boutique pickups. I mean, this is higher spec than that, I suppose. Ebony fretboard. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely love it. It feels. It doesn't quite feel the same as the Strandberg, but it's pretty close. The neck is super. It's just, I love it. Absolutely love it, which is good because I will play it. I thought I'd just make it, not like it, and sell it, but I might make a few more slightly different variations and sell those. But I want it to be as good as my Pink Telly, which is my favourite guitar, complete accidental creation. You know, this is a lovely guitar, and turning it into this may not be the best idea. Oh, one other thing to mention. I'll put a link to this in the description. I had to buy these from eBay. Because this has got a stacked concentric pot. So if you're going to use something like this, you could do a build like this. This is volume at the bottom and tone at the top. 500k pots. But you have to make sure they're exactly the same size, otherwise the centre knob won't turn. I've made that mistake before. So this pot, the knobs and the pot was like 50 quid all up. I'm like, that's quite a lot of money for what should cost a tenner. But as this is like the controls of the guitar, it's definitely worth doing. If you're doing it from scratch, you'll be able to have separate knobs. And also, don't do a switch like this. Use a Gibson switch. That was a silly idea. Absolutely brilliant guitar. And here's a video on Rob's reaction to it, which should be hilarious. I don't know what it's like yet. And if that's not out quite yet, here's a video on a whiskey barrel that I've turned into a guitar cab. In fact, I'll put both videos because they'll both be cool. I don't know which one will be out, but be interesting. Thank you for watching.